Invisibility suited Raina Jefferson. For 6 years she'd mopped floors at Voss Global headquarters, while billionaire CEO Bradley Voss built an empire that would soon monopolize global technology. When his Japanese translator collapsed during crucial negotiations with Kurohana Corporation, Raina, a janitor everyone overlooked, stunned the room with perfect nuanced Japanese. Bradley's relief quickly turned to suspicion, as this unexpected savior deftly navigated cultural complexities that had nearly derailed his trillion-dollar deal. He couldn't know that Raina's linguistic gifts weren't coincidental. She was the widow of Haruki Tanaka, the brilliant researcher whose stolen algorithms powered Bradley's military programs, and whose accident had never been properly investigated. Now, after years of patient waiting, Raina had finally positioned herself at the center of Bradley's world, ready to expose the truth behind her husband's death and the dangerous technology that would soon threaten humanity itself. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Voss Global's Manhattan headquarters, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. Bradley Voss adjusted his custom-tailored Brioni suit as he stared at his reflection in the glass. At 42, he was the youngest person ever to reach a net worth of $300 billion. His face had graced the cover of Fortune, Time, and Entrepreneur more times than he could count. 10 minutes until the Kurohana delegation arrives, Mr. Voss, said Sarah Wilson, his chief of staff, her voice tight with the day's tension. Bradley didn't turn around. The projections? Still favorable. If the merger goes through, you'll control 68% of the world's next-gen AI infrastructure. She paused. But the Justice Department is watching closely, not to mention the EU and Chinese regulators. Let them watch, Bradley said with a smirk. By the time they decide what to do, we'll be too big to touch. The Kurohana deal represented more than just another acquisition. It was the final piece in a decade-long strategy to create the world's first true AI monopoly. Kurohana Corporation had pioneered quantum language processing algorithms that would integrate seamlessly with Voss Global's neural networks. Together, they would revolutionize everything from autonomous vehicles to military applications. 3 floors below, Raina Jefferson methodically moved through the executive bathroom with practiced efficiency. At 47, she had spent the last 6 years cleaning the spaces where billion-dollar decisions were made, invisible to those who made them. Her uniform, gray with blue trim, bore the small Voss Global logo on the breast pocket, marking her as part of the building rather than its operations. "Looks like a circus up there today," said Frank, a security guard passing through. "Japanese bigwigs coming in. Voss is about to become king of the world if he pulls this off." Raina nodded politely. "More messes to clean up either way," she replied, her voice melodic but subdued. What Frank didn't know, what nobody at Voss Global knew, was that Raina had once walked through the corridors of Tokyo University as a linguistics fellow, fluent in 4 languages, with Japanese being her specialty. That she had spent 12 years in Kyoto, married to Haruki Tanaka, before his mysterious death had sent her back to America, broken and silent. The elevator opened on the 60th floor, and Raina pushed her cleaning cart forward. The executive suite was buzzing with activity. She kept her head down as she always did, moving around clusters of executives and assistants who never seemed to see her. "They're here," someone announced, and the energy in the room shifted. The Kurohana delegation entered like a wave of calm precision. 7 men and 3 women, each dressed in impeccably tailored dark suits, moved with synchronized purpose. At their center walked Yuto Kusanagi, CEO of Kurohana and notoriously traditional businessman. At 65, his steel-gray hair and piercing eyes gave him an aura of timeless authority. Bradley stepped forward with his most practiced smile, hand extended. "Mr. Kusanagi, welcome to New York and to Voss Global." Kusanagi bowed slightly, took Bradley's hand with formal precision, and replied in Japanese. The interpreter, a thin man named Davis who had been with Voss Global for over a decade, translated smoothly. "Mr. Kusanagi thanks you for your hospitality and looks forward to a productive discussion." Bradley's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He had expected Kusanagi to speak English, as he had during their brief video conferences. The choice to speak Japanese now was deliberate, a power move designed to put Bradley at a disadvantage on his own turf. "Please, let's move to the conference room," Bradley gestured, maintaining his composure. "We've prepared a traditional tea service that I hope meets with your approval." As the delegation moved toward the massive conference room, Raina continued her work, emptying wastebaskets and wiping down surfaces. No one noticed her ears catching every word, her eyes observing every gesture. In the conference room, Davis continued translating as the preliminary pleasantries were exchanged. Kusanagi spoke in metaphors and cultural references that Davis struggled to convey fully. Bradley grew increasingly frustrated as nuances were clearly being lost. 30 minutes into the meeting, Davis suddenly clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. He collapsed to the floor before anyone could react. "Davis!" Bradley shouted, rushing to his side. "Someone call medical!" The room erupted in controlled chaos. The Kurohana delegation remained seated, faces impassive, but eyes alert. A security officer performed CPR while Sarah called for emergency services. "Heart attack," the security officer said grimly. "Ambulance is on the way." As paramedics arrived and took Davis away, Bradley turned to Sarah, his voice low and urgent. "Find another translator. Now." "On it," she replied, already on her phone, stepping out of the room. Bradley turned to the Kurohana delegation with a forced smile. "A brief recess, if you don't mind. Refreshments will be brought in." Kusanagi nodded, his expression unreadable. In the hallway, Sarah's voice grew increasingly desperate. "No one. Check the entire legal department. Someone must speak Japanese." 10 minutes passed, then 20. The Kurohana executives began exchanging glances. Bradley's jaw clenched tighter with each passing moment. Raina had been quietly cleaning the adjacent room, hearing everything. She hesitated, years of invisibility making her reluctant to step forward. But something deeper, perhaps the part of her that had once stood proudly in academic halls, pushed her forward. She approached Sarah, who was still frantically making calls. "Excuse me," Raina said softly. Sarah barely glanced at her. "Not now." "I speak Japanese," Raina continued, her voice steady, fluently. Sarah stopped, finally looking at Raina, really looking at her perhaps for the first time. "You what?" "I lived in Japan for 12 years. I was a linguistics fellow at Tokyo University. I can translate." Sarah's expression moved from shock to desperate hope. "Wait here," she ordered, then rushed back into the conference room. Moments later, Bradley emerged, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. He looked Raina up and down, taking in her janitor's uniform with poorly disguised disdain. "You speak Japanese?" he asked bluntly. "Yes, sir." Fluently. "Prove it." Raina squared, her shoulders slightly. "Watashi wa anata no kaigi no tame ni yakusha to shite hatarakimasu. Kurohana to no torihiki ga seiko suru yo. Saizen no tsukushimasu." Her accent was flawless, her intonation precise. Bradley didn't understand a word, but the confidence in her delivery was unmistakable. He was trapped between his prejudice and the ticking clock of a $1 trillion deal. "Fine," he said finally. "But change first. Sarah, get her something appropriate to wear." 20 minutes later, Raina entered the conference room in a borrowed blazer and skirt that didn't quite fit. The Kurohana delegation looked up with mild curiosity. Bradley made no introduction. He simply nodded at Raina to begin. Kusanagi spoke, his eyes evaluating this new development. "Anata wa watashi tachi no gengo o hanashimasu ka?" Raina bowed respectfully before responding. "Hai, 12 nenkan Nihon ni sunde imashita. Kyoto Daigaku de Gengogaku o benkyou shimashita." Kusanagi's eyebrows raised slightly, the first real emotion he had displayed. He continued in Japanese, using complex phrasing and cultural references that would challenge even native speakers. Raina translated smoothly, capturing not just the words, but the cultural nuances, the subtle implications, the respect encoded in the language. The tension in the room gradually dissipated as communication flowed naturally for the first time. Bradley watched in astonishment as Kusanagi became more animated, even smiling occasionally. The Kurohana team began taking notes eagerly. Whatever, Raina was saying, it was working. After 2 hours of negotiations, Kusanagi rose. Through Raina, he said, "This has been most productive, more so than I anticipated. I would like to continue our discussions over dinner tonight, a private affair. Just you, myself, and your exceptional translator." Bradley couldn't believe his luck. A private dinner was unprecedented at this stage. "I would be honored," he replied, his eyes darting momentarily to Raina. As the delegation departed, promises of dinner arrangements made, Bradley pulled Sarah aside. "Get HR to process a temporary position change for her. Something that sounds legitimate. Cultural liaison or whatever, just until the deal closes." "And after that?" Sarah asked. Bradley's face hardened. "After that, she goes back to cleaning toilets. No janitor is going to become the face of this deal." Later that evening, as the offices emptied, Raina returned to her cleaning duties. The borrowed clothes were returned, her gray uniform back in place. She moved through the executive floor, collecting trash and wiping surfaces as if the afternoon had never happened. When the floor was empty, she pulled out a phone from her pocket and dialed a number. When it answered, she spoke in perfect Japanese. "Care. Wa watashi tachi ga omotte ita yori mo kiken desu. Demo watashi wa hairimashita. He's more dangerous than we thought, but I'm in." The voice on the other end replied simply, "Ki o tsukete. Be careful." Raina ended the call and continued her work, invisible once more, but with purpose burning behind her eyes. The morning headlines splashed across digital feeds worldwide. Janitor saves billion-dollar deal. The story had leaked overnight. A rags to riches narrative too irresistible for the media to ignore. Photographs of Raina, hastily taken during the meeting, appeared alongside Bradley's official portrait. "This is a disaster," Bradley fumed, pacing his penthouse office. "We need to control the narrative immediately." Sarah stood nearby, tablet in hand. "PR has drafted a statement positioning you as the discoverer of hidden talent within the company. They're spinning it as Voss Global's commitment to recognizing excellence at all levels." Bradley scoffed. "Fine, whatever works. Where is she now?" "HR has processed her temporary position change. She's waiting in the small conference room." "Good. Make sure she understands this is temporary. Very temporary." Raina sat perfectly still in the conference room, hands folded in her lap. The new ID badge around her neck read, "Interim Language Advisor," a title hastily created that morning. She wore her own clothes today, a simple navy pantsuit that, while not designer, spoke of quiet dignity. Bradley entered without knocking. "The dinner went well," he said without preamble. "Kusanagi wants you present at all future negotiations." "I understand," Raina replied evenly. "Let me be clear," Bradley continued, remaining standing to maintain physical dominance. "You work for me. Everything you hear is confidential. Everything you translate must be approved by me first. This position is temporary and comes with no guarantees beyond the closing of this deal." Raina nodded once. "Of course, Mr. Voss." "Good." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Where did you learn Japanese anyway?" A brief shadow crossed Raina's face. "I studied linguistics at Kyoto University. I lived in Japan for 12 years. Didn't know janitors could afford international education," Bradley remarked dismissively. "My circumstances have changed over the years, Mr. Voss," Raina replied, her voice revealing nothing. As Bradley left, Raina's mind drifted back 20 years, to cherry blossoms and ancient temples, to lecture halls where she had once been respected, to the small apartment she had shared with Haruki Tanaka. Haruki had been brilliant, a linguistic prodigy whose theories on language patterns in intelligence gathering had attracted attention from both academic and government circles. They had met at a conference, fallen in love over discussions of phonetic algorithms and cultural coding, married beneath blooming sakura. Those had been golden years, filled with purpose and partnership, until Haruki began consulting on a classified project, one that made him increasingly withdrawn, increasingly afraid. "Some things should remain human, Raina," he had told her one night, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some patterns shouldn't be decoded by machines." A month later, he was gone. A boating accident, they said. No body recovered. The sharp knock on the conference room door pulled Raina back to the present. A young woman entered, petite, with short, brown hair and bright, intelligent eyes. "Ms. Jefferson, I'm Eva Thompson, Mr. Voss's assistant. I've been asked to show you to your temporary office and get you set up with system access." Eva led Raina through corridors of glass and steel to a small interior office, windowless but clean and functional. "The Kurohana team has sent over briefing materials for tomorrow's session," Eva explained, demonstrating the computer system. "Although," she added with a nervous laugh, "I'm sure none of us will know if you mistranslate." "Translation isn't just about words," Raina replied gently. "It's about carrying meaning across worlds." Eva's expression softened with genuine curiosity. "How many languages do you speak?" "4 fluently, 2 more conversationally." "That's amazing. I've always wanted to learn another language. I'm hoping to work in diplomacy someday." Something in the young woman's earnestness touched Raina. The best diplomats listen more than they speak. Eva smiled. "I'll remember that." Meanwhile, across town in a sleek boutique hotel, Yuto Kusanagi sat with his core team, reviewing the previous day's negotiations. "What do we know about this translator?" he asked in Japanese. A young woman, Aiko Nakamura, sharp-featured and intense, opened a folder. Raina Jefferson, age 47, widowed, employed by Voss Global as maintenance staff for 6 years, but before that, she paused for effect. She was Raina Tanaka, wife of Haruki Tanaka. The room went silent. "The Haruki Tanaka?" asked an older executive. "Yes," Aiko confirmed. She published a paper on linguistic pattern recognition that only someone with native-level fluency could produce. It was groundbreaking work. Kusanagi's face remained impassive, but his eyes sharpened. How interesting that such talent would be cleaning floors in Voss's building. "Should we be concerned?" asked another executive. "On the contrary," Kusanagi replied. "I believe we should watch very carefully indeed." Back at Voss Global, Bradley called in his chief technology officer, Lena Harrington, a brilliant, no-nonsense woman who had been with the company since its early days. "I need everything on Raina Jefferson," Bradley demanded. "Background check, security clearance, the works." Lena raised an eyebrow. "The translator? She's already cleared for building access." "Deeper, Lena. Something doesn't add up. Nobody goes from academics to pushing a mop without a story." "I'll see what I can find," Lena replied, making a note. The following day, negotiations continued in earnest. The Kurohana team presented technical specifications for their quantum language processors, technology that would integrate with Voss Global's neural networks to create unprecedented AI capabilities. Raina translated complex technical jargon flawlessly, but Bradley noticed something odd. Kusanagi occasionally used phrases that made the Kurohana team exchange glances, yet Raina's translation seemed to smooth these moments over. During a break, a young man approached Raina in the hallway. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his Voss Global ID badge. "Ms. Jefferson, I'm Tom Baker from HR. We're conducting some additional verification for your temporary position." Raina nodded politely, but her eyes had caught the slight discoloration around his badge photo, a telltale sign of hasty forgery. "Of course," she replied. "What would you like to know?" "Just a few questions about your employment history," he said, pulling out a tablet. "It says here you worked at—" He hesitated slightly. "Miyako Language Institute before coming to Voss Global?" Raina tilted her head. "No, I'm afraid that's incorrect. I was at Cornell University's linguistics department." The young man blinked, rapidly. "Oh, my mistake." His accent slipped slightly, a Midwestern vowel shift that wouldn't be present in a New York native. "No problem, Tom," Raina said with a smile. "Or should I say, whatever your real name is." The color drained from his face. Raina continued, her voice low but firm. "Your badge is forged. Your accent is inconsistent. And Miyako Language Institute doesn't exist, though it's a clever attempt at a Japanese-sounding name. I don't know. I recommend you leave now, Raina interrupted gently. Before I call security. The man backed away, then turned and hurried toward the elevators. Raina watched him go, then pulled out her phone and took a discreet photo of his retreating figure. She sent it with a brief message. Rival firm. Amateur work. Unbeknownst to Raina, Bradley had installed tracking software on her temporary employee badge. In his office, he watched a digital map of her movements throughout the building. Every bathroom visit, every coffee break, every conversation logged and analyzed. She went to the R&D floor yesterday, he told Sarah. Why would a translator need access to R&D? Her badge shouldn't have cleared her for that floor, Sarah replied, frowning. Exactly. Something's not right. That evening, after another successful negotiation session, Raina was gathering her notes when Kusanagi approached her. His delegation already departed. Yuhi wa kumo no sukimakara, he said softly. Kage wa kete mo, hikari wa nokoru. The sun set. Through the gap in clouds. Though shadows vanish, light remains. Raina's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the coded haiku structure used in certain Japanese intelligence circles. Ame ga yandemo, mizu wa nagareru, she replied carefully. Shizuku wa umi etukeru, though rain has stopped, water flows. Droplets return to the sea. Kusanagi nodded once, satisfaction in his eyes, then departed without another word. Later that night, a critical negotiation point arose during a dinner between Bradley and two Kurohana executives. Without Raina present, Bradley relied on a hastily hired agency translator who nearly caused a diplomatic disaster by misinterpreting a Japanese idiom about corporate loyalty as an accusation of espionage. The next morning, Bradley was furious. From now on, you don't leave my side during any interaction with Kurohana. Understood? Yes, Mr. Voss, Raina replied calmly. Over the following days, a quiet bond formed between Raina and Eva. They often ate lunch together in Raina's small office, Eva asking questions about languages and cultures, Raina providing gentle guidance. How do you stay so calm when Mr. Voss treats you like... Eva trailed off, embarrassed. Like a janitor who should know her place. Raina finished with a small smile. Dignity isn't given by others, Eva. It's maintained from within. Eva nodded thoughtfully. I've been practicing Japanese on my language app. Would you mind if I tried a phrase on you? Raina listened as Eva carefully pronounced a greeting, then corrected her tone gently. The middle syllable should lift slightly, like this. As days passed, Lena Harrington's investigation into Raina's background hit unusual roadblocks. Most of her records from her time in Japan are sealed or redacted, she reported to Bradley. That's not normal for an academic. Bradley's paranoia deepened. Keep digging. After a long day of negotiations, Raina visited a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The gray tombstone was simple, engraved with kanji characters that spelled out Tanaka Haruki, with dates marking a life cut short at 38. She placed a single white chrysanthemum on the grave, a symbol of truth. In Japanese culture, I miss you, she whispered in Japanese. But I'm close now, so close to finishing what you started. The sound of footsteps on gravel made her turn. A man in a trench coat stood several yards away, his face half hidden in shadow. You shouldn't have come back, he said in accented English. Raina stood facing him without fear. Hello, Kazuo. It's been a long time. The man stepped forward, his features now visible, Asian, mid-50s, with a thin scar running along his jawline. This is dangerous, Raina. For everyone. I know exactly what I'm doing, she replied. Do you? He challenged. Bradley Voss isn't just another corporate shark. What he's planning with that AI goes far beyond business. That's why I'm here. Kazuo shook his head. Haruki would want you safe, not walking into the dragon's lair. Raina's expression hardened. Haruki would want the truth exposed, no matter the cost. As they stood in silent confrontation, The pieces of a much larger game began to align, a game that had started years ago with a brilliant linguist's death and would soon shake the foundations of the corporate world's most powerful AI empire. The cemetery had grown quiet as darkness settled around Raina and Kazuo. Their conversation hung in the cool evening air, weighted with unspoken history. "We should talk somewhere safer," Kazuo said, glancing around the empty graveyard. "Too many ears in this city." They walked to a small ramen shop several blocks away. The cramped interior was warm and fragrant, with steam rising from pots behind. The counter. They took seats in the back corner, ordering in Japanese. When the server left, Kazuo leaned forward. "Voss is developing military applications for the merged technology," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The linguistic processing algorithms from Kurohana, combined with Voss's neural networks, would create the perfect propaganda machine, capable of identifying cultural pressure points, generating tailored misinformation, manipulating entire populations through their native languages. Raina's fingers tightened around her cup of tea. That would violate every ethical guideline in Japan. Kusanagi would never agree. Unless he doesn't know. The military contracts are buried deep, compartmentalized even within Voss Global. "How did you learn this?" Kazuo's eyes darkened. "The same way Haruki did." The implications hung heavily between them. Raina's mind flashed back to Haruki's growing anxiety in the weeks before his death, his cryptic warnings about machines that could weaponize language itself. "I need proof," Raina said finally. "Something concrete I can take to Kusanagi." "Be careful. Voss didn't build his empire by letting threats live long." The next morning, Kusanagi arrived at Voss Global with a smaller delegation than usual. His demeanor seemed different, more deliberate, more testing. In the conference room, he began discussing contract terms that hadn't been previously mentioned. His language became increasingly nuanced, filled with cultural references and traditional Japanese business idioms. "Kono keiyaku wa 3 no shuki de 5 no kika no fukumu. Shikashi, ukai no tori no yoni, watashi tachi wa jiyu otamotsu." Bradley looked expectantly at Raina for translation. "Mr. Kusanagi says the contract should have a 3-year cycle with 5 renewal periods," she translated smoothly. "However, like the cormorant bird in traditional fishing, we must maintain freedom while being guided." Bradley frowned. "What does that mean exactly?" "It's a cultural reference," Raina explained. "In traditional Japanese fishing, cormorants have rings around their necks so they can't swallow the larger fish they catch. They work for the fishermen but can't take the most valuable catches for themselves. Mr. Kusanagi is suggesting that, while our companies will work together, neither should restrict the other from independent development." Kusanagi nodded appreciatively at her interpretation. Bradley looked between them, a flash of suspicion crossing his face. "Tell Mr. Kusanagi, we agree in principle, but the specifics of independent development would need careful definition in the contract." As the meeting continued, Kusanagi introduced increasingly complex cultural landmines in the negotiations, phrases and concepts that only someone with deep understanding of Japanese business culture would recognize as significant. Each time, Raina navigated them flawlessly, earning subtle nods of approval from the Kurohana team. Later that day, Raina was organizing translation notes when she intercepted a memo that had been mistakenly included in her document batch. It was addressed to the Voss Global Board, outlining the Translator Redundancy Plan, a strategy to replace human translators with an AI system being developed in parallel with the merger negotiations. The memo stated, "While the current human translator has proven unexpectedly adequate, the JLT-5 prototype is now achieving 94% accuracy in cultural nuance recognition. We anticipate full deployment capability by Q3, eliminating the need for human intermediaries in international negotiations." Raina photographed the memo discreetly before returning it to the batch. Her face remained impassive, but her mind was already calculating this new information. Bradley Voss paced his office, agitation evident in every movement. On the screens behind his desk, video feeds showed various angles of the day's negotiations. "Did you see how they looked at her?" he demanded of Lena Harrington. "Like she's some kind of linguistic messiah. This was supposed to be my deal, my moment." The board is pleased with the progress, Lena reminded him, her pragmatism a counterpoint to his ego. I'm not paying you to repeat obvious facts, Bradley snapped. What did you find on her background? Lena opened a tablet. Her file is peculiar. Employment history is straightforward enough. She worked at Cornell after returning from Japan, but her academic records from Kyoto have significant redactions, and her husband's death certificate lists accident as cause, but the case was reviewed by Japanese intelligence. Intelligence? A linguistics professor had intelligence connections? Apparently. And here's something else interesting. 3 months after his death, she liquidated all their assets in Japan and returned to the US with virtually nothing. Took the janitorial position here 6 years ago, with falsified references claiming no higher education. Bradley stopped pacing. She deliberately hid her qualifications to get a menial job in my building? That's not just strange, it's suspicious. There's more, Lena continued. During her time in Japan, she and her husband were briefly investigated as part of something called Operation Whisper. Most of the file is classified, but it appears to have been a counterintelligence operation focused on corporate espionage. Between Japanese and American tech firms in the late 90s, Bradley's face darkened. So our janitorial savior might actually be a corporate spy. Or former spy, Lena corrected. The investigation was closed without charges. I want surveillance doubled, Bradley ordered. Every conversation, every movement, every bathroom break, and get me everything on Operation Whisper. I don't care what strings you have to pull. As the days passed, Raina's thoughts increasingly turned to the past. During quiet moments, memories of her life with Herooqi flooded back. Their small apartment near the Kamo River in Kyoto, morning walks through the temple gardens, heated discussions over tea about the ethics of linguistic technology. They had met at a conference on computational linguistics, where Herooqi had presented his revolutionary paper on pattern recognition in cross-cultural communication. His theories had drawn attention from both academic institutions and intelligence agencies, leading to consulting work that became increasingly classified. What had started as academic research had evolved into something darker. Corporations on both sides of the Pacific were weaponizing language algorithms, developing systems to manipulate markets and influence public opinion. Herooqi and Raina had found themselves recruited as consultants, then as assets, walking a dangerous line between Japanese and American interests. We're becoming part of the machine we warned against, Herooqi had told her one night, his voice heavy with regret. Their decision to become double agents, feeding carefully selected information to both sides while working secretly to expose the ethical violations, had been born of desperation. For nearly 2 years they had played this dangerous game, documenting evidence of corporate manipulation and preparing to blow the whistle. Then came the boating accident. No witnesses, no body recovered, just a capsized rental boat and Herooqi's belongings washed ashore. Raina had never believed it was an accident, but without proof and with threats veiled behind condolences, she had retreated to America, biding her time, watching, waiting for the right moment to finish what they had started. The opportunity had finally arrived with the Voss-Kurohana merger, the ultimate convergence of the technologies Herooqi had feared. One afternoon, as negotiations were wrapping up, a stern-faced Japanese man from the Kurohana board requested a private word with Raina. In an empty conference room, he closed the door and spoke in rapid Japanese. Anata ga dare no tame ni hataraku no ka wakaranai ga, kono torihiki o kiken ni saraseru koto wa dekimasen. I don't know who you work for, but you cannot jeopardize this deal. Raina maintained perfect composure. Watashi wa tada yakusha to shite koko ni imasu. I am only here as a translator. Uso o tsukanai de kudasai, he replied harshly. Don't lie. Anata ga Tanaka Herooqi no tsuma datta koto o shite imasu. We know you were Herooqi Tanaka's wife. A moment of silence stretched between them. Raina's expression revealed nothing. Dochira, nichuse o tsukushite imasu ka? He demanded. Where do your loyalties lie? Shinjitsu ni, she answered simply. With the truth. The man studied her for a long moment before nodding once and leaving without another word. Later that same day, Eva knocked tentatively on Raina's office door. The young assistant looked troubled, clutching a folder to her chest. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, glancing nervously down the hallway. "It's important." Raina gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What's wrong?" Eva closed the door and lowered her voice. "I was organizing Mr. Voss's private files, and I found something I wasn't supposed to see." She opened the folder to reveal documents stamped with classified and Project Thalassa. The documents detail how Voss Global has been using AI for unauthorized surveillance of activist groups and political dissidents. They're selling the technology to governments with terrible human rights records, and the Kurohana algorithms would make it even more powerful, able to interpret cultural context, identify resistance leaders through linguistic patterns, even predict protest activities based on communication analysis. Raina's face remained calm, but her heart raced. This was exactly what Herooqi had feared, exactly what had likely gotten him killed. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked carefully. Eva's eyes were wide with sincerity. "Because you're the only person who seems to understand what's really at stake, the only one who doesn't worship the ground Bradley walks on." Raina considered the young woman before her, earnest, idealistic, and now potentially in danger. "Eva, having this knowledge is dangerous. These aren't people who forgive mistakes." "I know," Eva whispered, "but I couldn't just do nothing." Before Raina could respond, her computer pinged with an alert. The Kurohana team had sent over the latest contract draft for review before tomorrow's session. As she scanned the document, Raina spotted a subtly altered clause, one that would effectively transfer proprietary algorithm rights to Voss Global under certain triggering conditions. The change was masterfully disguised within legal terminology, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. "They're trying to steal the algorithms," Raina murmured. "Who is?" Eva asked. "Voss. They've modified the contract to give them ownership of Kurohana's core technology." Eva looked confused. "But why would they risk the whole deal for that? They're already getting access through the merger." "Access isn't ownership," Raina explained. "With ownership, they could apply the technology anywhere, including the military applications mentioned in those documents you found." As night fell over New York, media alerts began buzzing across devices throughout Voss Global. Breaking news. Headlines flashed. Espionage allegations rock Voss Kurohana deal. An anonymous source had leaked information about corporate spying within the negotiations. The story specifically mentioned translation services being used as cover for intelligence. Clearing, within an hour, security personnel approached Raina's small office. Two men in dark suits stood in the doorway. "Ms. Jefferson, please come with us." "May I ask why?" Raina inquired calmly, though she knew the answer. "Security concerns. Mr. Voss has requested your removal from the premises." They escorted her through the building, past staring employees, into the elevator, and down to the lobby. News cameras had already gathered outside, tipped off about the developing scandal. As Raina was walked out the front doors, flashes erupted from all directions. The headline would be perfect. The janitor turned translator now ejected as a suspected spy. She maintained her dignity as she walked through the media gauntlet, offering no comments, her face a mask of calm. Later that night, Raina was taken to a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. The room they placed her in had no windows, only a table and 2 chairs. She sat for hours, alone, refusing to show anxiety. When the door finally opened, she was surprised to see not an interrogator but Yuto Kusanagi himself. "Ms. Jefferson," he said in English, "I apologize for the theatrics. This isn't Kurohana's doing? The media leak? No. That was Bradley's desperate attempt to control the narrative. But this," he gestured to the room, "this is my doing. I needed to speak with you away from Voss's surveillance." He sat across from her. "One phone call from me and you were released from custody. Interesting how much influence a potential trillion-dollar deal creates, isn't it? What do you want, Mr. Kusanagi?" "The same thing you want, Raina Tanaka. The truth about Project Thalassa and justice for Herooqi." Raina's composure cracked just slightly. "You knew Herooqi?" Not personally, but his research crossed my desk years ago with warnings attached, warnings I should have heeded sooner. He leaned forward. The real test begins now. Bradley believes you've been removed from the equation. That makes you our greatest asset. Morning light streamed through the windows of Voss Global's executive floor as Bradley Voss addressed his crisis team. The news cycle was dominated by espionage allegations, stock prices were fluctuating, and the Kurohana delegation had requested a 48-hour pause in negotiations. "We control the narrative," Bradley insisted. "The Translator was a plant, likely industrial espionage from our competitors. We discovered the breach. We removed the threat. We're strengthening security." End of story. The boardroom doors swung open unexpectedly. Every head turned as Raina Jefferson walked in, followed by Yuto Kusanagi and two Kurohana executives. "What the hell is this?" Bradley demanded, rising from his chair. "Your security is quite impressive, Mr. Voss," Kusanagi said pleasantly. "But diplomatic immunity creates interesting exceptions." "Diplomatic," Bradley sputtered, looking at Raina with undisguised hatred. "Ms. Jefferson has been appointed as a special cultural attaché to our delegation," Kusanagi explained. "Her unique insights are invaluable to these negotiations." Bradley's face flushed with anger. "This is my company, you can't just—" "We can and have," Kusanagi interrupted, his voice suddenly steel beneath silk. "Unless you wish to explain to your board why a $1 trillion deal collapsed over your personal vendetta." The room fell silent. Board members exchanged glances, clearly calculating the cost of Bradley's ego against shareholder value. "Fine," Bradley said finally, his voice tight. "But she stays out of private board discussions." "Of course," Kusanagi agreed smoothly. "We respect corporate boundaries even if others do not." As the meeting reorganized to accommodate the new reality, Lena Harrington slipped away unnoticed. She took the elevator to her office, locked the door, and made a secure call. "It's done," she said quietly. "I've transferred everything to you. All the Thalassa files, the military applications, everything. Bradley's lost control." On the other end, Kusanagi's assistant confirmed receipt of the files. "Your contribution won't be forgotten, Ms. Harrington." "I'm not doing this for reward," Lena replied. "Some technology shouldn't exist. Not in his hands, not in anyone's." The day progressed with tense negotiations, Bradley barely containing his fury as Raina once again facilitated communication between the companies. During a brief recess, he cornered Lena in a hallway. "I want her gone," he hissed. "I don't care how. Find something, anything we can use." "The board won't support that," Lena warned. "Not with the deal this close to completion. The board works for me, not the other way around." Lena regarded him coolly. "Perhaps you should remember that arrangement requires their continued confidence." As she walked away, Bradley's phone buzzed with a security alert. Someone had accessed restricted files from the R&D server. The trace showed the access point, Eva Thompson's workstation. By afternoon, security escorted Eva from the building. The young assistant's protests echoed through the lobby as she was marched out, personal belongings in a cardboard box. "This is wrong! You can't silence the truth!" she shouted as guards pushed her through the revolving doors. Raina watched from an upper-floor window, her face grim. She pulled out her phone and sent a text. "Ava needs extraction. Plan B." Meanwhile, Kusanagi's team presented a dramatically revised deal structure, one with a 48-hour deadline and complex cultural clauses embedded throughout the legal framework. "These additions are unnecessary," Bradley objected. "They complicate a straightforward business arrangement." "On the contrary," Kusanagi replied, "they simply ensure that our partnership is built on mutual respect rather than exploitation." The implication hung in the air. Kusanagi knew about the contract manipulation attempt. As Raina translated the exchange, she caught Bradley's eye. His look of pure hatred sent a chill through her, despite her outward calm. That evening, as most employees left for the day, Raina accessed a secured terminal using credentials Lena had secretly provided. What she found confirmed her worst fears. The AI technology Bradley planned to deploy was indeed based on Haruki's stolen research. Algorithms he had developed for cultural pattern recognition, now perverted into tools for mass manipulation. Her mind flashed back to their last week together in Japan. They had discovered that Voss Global's Black Operations Division had infiltrated their research team, copying Haruki's work and developing military applications without his knowledge. When Herooqi had confronted the Voss representative, threats followed. Then came the boating accident during what was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. Raina had barely escaped herself, fleeing the boat minutes before unknown assailants arrived. She had watched from shore, hidden in the trees, as they searched the vessel, then scuttled it to sink. She'd heard enough of their conversation to know they worked for Voss. With no body recovered, Herooqi was declared missing, then dead. Raina had gone underground, changing her name back to Jefferson, her identity before marriage, and eventually making her way into Voss Global as a janitor, invisible, forgotten, but watching and waiting. Now, 6 years later, she finally had access to the evidence that could bring justice for Herooqi and prevent the weaponization of his work. The following day, Kusanagi arranged a cultural training session for the Voss executive team, a requirement of the revised deal terms. The centerpiece was a traditional tea ceremony demonstration. Raina led the session, explaining the significance of each movement, each gesture. When Bradley's turn came to receive the ceremonial tea bowl, Raina performed a subtle variation in the ritual, one that any Japanese person would recognize as a profound insult, suggesting the recipient was unworthy of respect. Kusanagi and his team noticed immediately. Several covered their mouths to hide their shock. Bradley, oblivious to the cultural subtext, drank the tea with his usual impatience. The message was clear to everyone who understood. Bradley Voss had been publicly shamed without saying a single word. Later that afternoon, Eva returned, not as Bradley's assistant, but as a junior envoy for Kurohana Corporation, complete with diplomatic credentials. Mr. Kusanagi recognized my potential, she explained to a stunned security team that could not legally prevent her entry due to her new status. She made her way directly to Raina, slipping her a flash drive during a brief embrace. Everything you need is here, she whispered. Documents proving Voss forged approvals for UN technology oversight boards. They've been deploying restricted AI in conflict zones for years. That night, Kazuo met Raina at a secure location, a small apartment, registered to a shell company. You've gone too far, he warned. Bradley is cornered, and cornered predators are the most dangerous. I can't walk away, Raina insisted. Not now, not when we're so close. Herooqi would want you alive more than he'd want justice. Raina's eyes flashed with rare anger. Don't tell me what Herooqi would want. He died because he refused to let his work be perverted into weapons. The best way to honor him is to finish what he started. Kazuo studied her for a long moment. There's something you should know. Kusanagi isn't just doing this for ethical reasons. Kurohana has military contracts too. Different ones, but still weapons development. I know, Raina replied calmly. There are no saints in this game, Kazuo. But right now, Kusanagi is the devil who serves my purpose. And when he doesn't anymore, then I'll deal with him too. Kazuo sighed deeply. Then at least don't go alone tomorrow. Let me back you up. No more shadows, Raina said firmly. No more proxies. This time, I face him directly. The next morning, Bradley convened an emergency executive summit to salvage what he could of the deal and his reputation. Board members, legal teams, and PR consultants filled the main conference room, strategizing damage control. No one noticed Raina enter until she was already at the front of the room. Conversations died mid-sentence as heads turned. She stood tall, no longer the invisible janitor or the accommodating translator, but a woman with purpose burning in her eyes. Watashi tachi wa mada owata imasen, she said in clear, ringing Japanese. We're not done, then switching to English so everyone would understand. But you are. The executive boardroom had fallen into stunned silence. Raina's words hung in the air, a declaration of war delivered with chilling calm. Bradley's face contorted with rage. But before he could respond, the doors opened again. Yuto Kusanagi entered, followed by his core team and several unfamiliar men in suits who radiated the unmistakable aura of government officials. "What is the meaning of this?" Bradley demanded, struggling to maintain composure in front of his board. Kusanagi bowed slightly. "My apologies for the interruption, Mr. Voss. I've taken the liberty of sharing our revised negotiation terms with your board directly." He gestured to one of his assistants, who distributed tablets to each board member. "You've gone behind my back?" Bradley's voice rose dangerously. "Not at all," Kusanagi replied smoothly. "I'm simply ensuring transparency. As part of our revised terms, we're appointing Ms. Jefferson as our official cultural strategist for the remainder of the negotiations." He tapped his tablet, and a pre-recorded video began playing on the main screen. In it, Kusanagi formally introduced Raina as a vital bridge between their companies, praising her unique insights and cultural expertise. "This is my company," Bradley hissed. "You don't make appointments here." A silver-haired board member, Diane Foster, cleared her throat. "Actually, Bradley, we need to discuss this. If Kurohana insists on Ms. Jefferson's involvement as a condition of the deal—" "She was our janitor," Bradley exploded, instantly regretting his outburst as board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. "And yet," Diane continued evenly, "she's demonstrated exceptional value to these negotiations, value that has impressed our potential partners enough for them to specifically request her continued involvement." The implications were clear. The board was prioritizing the trillion-dollar deal over Bradley's personal vendetta. Over the next few days, Bradley's grip on his empire began to slip. Financial news outlets ran stories questioning his leadership. Investors called emergency meetings. Social media erupted with memes about the billionaire CEO brought low by a janitor. Meanwhile, Raina quietly arranged a meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office. In a secure conference room, she presented evidence about Voss Global's illegal surveillance program, codenamed Thalassa. "This AI system has been deployed domestically without FISA court approval," she explained to the stern-faced federal prosecutors. "It uses linguistic pattern recognition to flag individuals for enhanced surveillance based on cultural and ethnic markers." She slid across documents showing deployment in predominantly immigrant neighborhoods. "This violates not only privacy laws but constitutional protections against unreasonable search." The lead prosecutor studied the evidence. "Where did you obtain these files, Ms. Jefferson?" "They were discovered during standard due diligence for the Kurohana merger," she replied carefully. "As cultural liaison, I had legitimate access to materials relevant to the deal's ethics compliance." It wasn't entirely true, but it established a paper trail that couldn't be easily dismissed as corporate espionage. The next morning, news broke that a federal investigation was being opened into Voss Global's domestic surveillance activities. The company's stock plummeted 11% before noon. In an emergency damage control session, Bradley paced like a caged tiger. "This is a coordinated attack. First the translator, then Kusanagi, now federal prosecutors. Someone is pulling strings." "The evidence appears legitimate," the company's chief legal officer admitted reluctantly. "If Thalassa was indeed operating domestically without proper authorization—" "Every tech company gathers data," Bradley snapped. "We're being singled out because we're the biggest target." "There's more," Sarah Wilson interrupted, looking up from her tablet. "The Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board just announced public hearings on AI surveillance. They're specifically citing Voss Global as a case study." Bradley's face darkened. "Find out who leaked Thalassa. I want them buried." Meanwhile, Lena Harrington was preparing to testify before a closed Senate Intelligence Committee hearing. In a small preparation room, she reviewed her notes while her attorney advised her on procedure. "You need to be precise about the directives you received," the attorney cautioned, "especially regarding the algorithm biases." Lena nodded grimly. "I have documentation showing Bradley explicitly ordered us to implement targeting parameters based on linguistic markers associated with specific immigrant communities and activist groups." "And you raised ethical concerns?" "Repeatedly. I was told that ethical concerns were secondary to effectiveness." She looked down at her hands. I should have resigned then. Instead, I tried to mitigate from within. Your testimony will help ensure these abuses don't continue, her attorney assured her. After Lena's devastating testimony leaked to the press, Bradley realized his position was becoming untenable. He requested a private meeting with Raina, arranging to meet in a neutral location, a reserved room at the New York Public Library. Raina arrived precisely on time, dressed in a simple navy suit, her face composed. Bradley was already waiting, looking haggard despite his expensive clothes. "Let's cut to the chase," he said without preamble. "What do you want?" "Justice," Raina replied simply. Bradley scoffed. "Everyone has a price. Name yours." "This isn't about money." "Fine. Here's my offer. I'll personally ensure the Thalassa program is dissolved. I'll clear Eva Thompson's employment record, and I'll donate $10 million to digital privacy advocacy groups of your choosing." He leaned forward. "In exchange, you step back from the Kurohana negotiations and sign an NDA about your time at Voss Global." Raina studied him for a long moment. "You're offering hush money for a dying empire, Mr. Voss. Your board is already in revolt. 3 senior members have scheduled resignation announcements for tomorrow." Bradley's shock was visible. "How do you—" "The same way I know about the federal grand jury being convened next week." Raina stood, straightening her jacket. "Your offer is declined." As she reached the door, Bradley called after her. "He wasn't worth it, you know. Your husband. His research was promising but fundamentally flawed. We had to completely rebuild it after his accident." Raina paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Thank you for confirming what I already knew," she said without turning around. "That will be useful in court." She closed the door behind her, leaving Bradley to realize he'd just implicated himself in Haruki's death. The following days saw Bradley's empire crumbling piece by piece. 3 board members publicly resigned, citing ethical differences with current leadership. Major institutional investors began divesting. The Justice Department expanded its investigation to include potential violations of international law regarding AI deployment in conflict zones. Raina continued working closely with Kusanagi, finalizing alternative deal structures that would preserve the technological partnership while installing new ethical guardrails. Late one evening, as she was leaving Voss Global headquarters, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Miss Jefferson?" a man's voice asked. "My name is James Taylor. I worked on Haruki Tanaka's research team 6 years ago." Raina stopped walking. "Go on." "I've been following the news about Voss Global. I have information about your husband's death. That you should know. It wasn't an accident." "I'm aware of that, Mr. Taylor." "No, you don't understand. It wasn't just about silencing him. They needed him gone because he'd discovered a fatal flaw in the weaponized version of his algorithm, one that could cause catastrophic targeting errors in conflict zones." Raina's grip tightened on her phone. "Where are you now?" "I've been in hiding. But I have Haruki's original notes, the ones that prove he warned Voss about the flaws before they killed him." They arranged to meet at a private research library in the university district. The building was nearly empty when Raina arrived, with only a few graduate students hunched over books in the main reading room. James Taylor was a thin, nervous man in his early 40s, with premature gray streaking his dark hair. He led Raina to a private study room where he had spread out files and a laptop. "I was the junior researcher on the team," he explained. "Everyone else was let go after the project was classified, but I was kept on because I'd helped build the original language models." He pulled up files showing Haruki's original research protocols, alongside modified versions with military applications. Haruki's work was designed for cultural understanding, bridging divides through deeper linguistic analysis. Voss weaponized it, using it to identify cultural pressure points that could be exploited. "I know all this," Raina said quietly. "What I don't know is exactly how Herooqi died." James swallowed hard. He found evidence that early field tests of the system had caused civilian casualties due to misinterpreted cultural contexts. When he threatened to go public, Voss's Black Ops team was activated. He slid a folder across the table. "These are the last entries from Haruki's private journal. He believed someone close to him was under surveillance. Raina opened the folder with steady hands. Inside were photocopied pages of Haruki's distinctive handwriting. April 15th. The monitoring has increased. I found 3 new surveillance points in our apartment. R believes I'm becoming paranoid, but I can't tell her everything yet. It would put her at risk too. April 18th. Project Thalassa is more dangerous than I imagined. Not just privacy violations, but actual targeting errors. The cultural context engine misinterprets religious phrasing as threatening in 23% of cases. In a military deployment, that means innocent civilians marked as combatants. April 20th. I've secured the evidence on a separate server. If anything happens to me, R will know where to look. The boating trip this weekend should give me time to think clearly, away from their monitoring. Raina closed the journal, her composure finally cracking. He knew they were coming for him. Yes, James confirmed quietly. But he didn't know they had already compromised your boat's navigation system and emergency radio. The following morning, Raina attended a press conference where Bradley was attempting to reassert control of the narrative. Standing at a podium with the Voss Global logo, he spoke confidently about momentary challenges and commitment to ethical AI development. During the question period, Raina rose from her seat in the press gallery. Mr. Voss, can you comment on internal memos showing racial bias encoded in your AI algorithms? Specifically documents showing your direct order to target specific linguistic patterns common in minority communities? The room erupted as Raina held up copies of the damning memos. Cameras flashed, capturing Bradley's expression of shock and rage. The press conference dissolved into chaos as Bradley was rushed from the stage by his security team. By evening, the board had called an emergency session, placing him on a 2-week administrative leave while internal audits were conducted. Lena Harrington was appointed acting CEO, a development that sent Voss Global stock climbing for the first time in weeks. In her temporary office, far larger than her previous space, Raina received a visit from Eva, now confidently wearing a Kurohana badge. I've been working with Mr. Kusanagi's team, Eva explained excitedly. We've identified the mole in their organization. It's Aiko, the young executive who first investigated your background. She's been feeding information to someone on Voss's legal team? Benjamin Wright, Raina nodded. Bradley's personal attorney. They've been having an affair for months. Eva's eyes widened. How did you know? I clean floors, remember? Invisible people see everything. Raina allowed herself a small smile. What else have you learned? Aiko and Wright signed a separate, side deal, one that would have given Voss exclusive rights to Kurohana's core technology regardless of the main contract terms. Do you have proof? Eva nodded triumphantly. Kusanagi had me monitoring Wright's communications. I intercepted everything. Later that day, when confronted with the evidence, Aiko vanished, cleaning out her hotel room and disappearing before security could detain her. She took critical contract documents with her, triggering a manhunt across Tokyo and New York financial districts. That evening, Kazuo appeared at Raina's apartment unannounced. His face was grim as he handed her a sealed envelope. This was left with Haruki's attorney to be delivered to you under specific circumstances. When the Voss-Kurohana merger made international news with your name attached, it triggered the release conditions. The envelope was yellowed with age, sealed with wax bearing Haruki's family crest. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing a haiku, hidden in ancient texts. Truth sleeps beneath cherry blooms, Kyoto remembers. Raina's breath caught. It's a code, pointing to a data vault at Kyoto University. She looked up at Kazuo. I need to go to Japan. Kusanagi arranged a private jet for Raina, himself, and Eva to fly to Kyoto. During the long flight, Eva marveled at her sudden immersion in international intrigue. A month ago, I was getting coffee for Bradley, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. Now I'm flying to Japan on a corporate jet to uncover corporate conspiracies. Life rarely follows our planned paths, Raina observed. Sometimes the detours lead to our true purpose. Kusanagi, who had been silently reviewing documents, looked up. You've never told me, Ms. Jefferson. What is your true purpose in all this? Raina met his gaze steadily. To ensure my husband's work helps humanity rather than harms it, and to hold accountable those who perverted his vision. And after that? After that, Raina said quietly, I hope to find peace. In Kyoto, they were met by an elderly Japanese man named Hiroshi Tanaka, Haruki's father. Despite his age, he stood straight, his eyes sharp as he embraced Raina. Okaeri nasai, he said softly. Welcome home. Tadaima, she replied, tears finally breaking through her composed exterior. I'm home. With Hiroshi's help, they made their way to Kyoto University's ancient archives. The data vault Herooqi had referenced wasn't digital but physical, a hidden compartment in the university's rare manuscript collection, accessible only to those who understood the reference in his haiku. Meanwhile, back in New York, Bradley Voss had disappeared, vanishing before formal indictments could be filed. His private jet had filed a flight plan for a non-extradition country, but satellite tracking showed it had deviated course mid-flight. The manuscript archive at Kyoto University was housed in a modern building designed to blend harmoniously with the ancient campus. Climate-controlled rooms protected texts dating back centuries, preserved behind glass or in special storage units. Hiroshi Tanaka led Raina, Kusanagi, and Eva through security checkpoints, his emeritus professor status granting them access to restricted areas. In a back room, he approached a seemingly ordinary cabinet. Herooqi showed me this once, he explained, pressing hidden panels in a specific sequence. He said if anything happened to him, I should remember the pattern and wait for you to return. The cabinet's false back swung open, revealing a small safe with a biometric lock. It requires 2 people to open, Hiroshi continued. Haruki's fingerprint and yours. Raina pressed her thumb to the scanner. A green light flashed, then waited. Herooqi is gone, she said softly. How can we? Hiroshi placed his own thumb on the scanner. He used my print as a backup. He knew I would protect his legacy until you returned. The safe clicked open. Inside lay an old external hard drive and a handwritten letter. Raina took both with trembling hands. They retreated to a secure room where Kaito, a retired cybersecurity expert and friend of Haruki's, helped them access the hard drive's encrypted contents. This will take time, Kaito warned. Herooqi used multiple layers of protection. While they waited, Raina opened the letter, written in Haruki's distinctive script. My beloved Raina, if you're reading this, I am gone, and you've finally found your way back to Kyoto. I'm sorry for the secrets I kept from you in our final months together. I thought I was protecting you, but perhaps I was only protecting myself from facing the full horror of what I'd discovered. What began as research to bridge cultural divides through language was twisted into something monstrous. Voss stole my algorithms and repurposed them for psychological warfare, identifying cultural and linguistic pressure points that could be exploited to manipulate entire populations. When I discovered unauthorized tests in conflict zones had resulted in civilian casualties, I gathered evidence. That's when they marked me for elimination. The hard drive contains everything: the original research, the weaponized versions, the test results, and most importantly, proof of Bradley Voss's direct knowledge and approval of these activities. Don't know what world you're living in as you read this, or how much time has passed, but I trust you will use this information wisely to restore balance and prevent further harm. With eternal love, Herooqi. Tears streamed down Raina's face as she finished reading. Eva placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, while Kusanagi and Hiroshi respectfully maintained their distance. He knew, Raina whispered. He knew and still tried to stop them, even knowing what it would cost. After several hours, Kaito successfully unlocked the hard drive. What they found exceeded even their darkest expectations. Detailed records of how Voss Global had weaponized Haruki's linguistic AI for psychological operations, including mind control propaganda targeting specific cultural and ethnic groups. Most damning were videos of Bradley Voss himself authorizing field tests in active conflict zones, dismissing concerns about collateral damage as necessary data points. This is enough to bring down not just Voss, but several defense contractors complicit in these programs, Kusanagi observed grimly. We need to be careful how we release this, Raina cautioned. If it's not handled properly, the technology could be buried rather than reformed. What do you suggest? Kusanagi asked. A controlled disclosure through multiple channels, legal, academic, and public interest. Not just exposing the abuses, but offering an alternative vision based on Haruki's original ethical framework. Eva leaned forward eagerly. We could create an international ethics initiative in Haruki's name, something that establishes standards for AI development across cultural boundaries. The Herooqi Protocol. Raina nodded, a spark of hope lighting her eyes for the first time in years. Back in New York, Bradley's disappearance had triggered international alerts. His financial accounts were frozen, his properties placed under surveillance. The man who had once commanded an empire was now a fugitive. In Tokyo, Raina and Kusanagi presented their findings to a select group of officials from the Japanese Diet's Technology Oversight Committee. This evidence suggests violations of international law regarding psychological warfare, the committee chair stated. We will be forwarding these materials to the UN Technology Ethics Tribunal. Kusanagi bowed formally. Japan must take a leadership role in establishing ethical boundaries for AI development. The alternative is a world where technology becomes a weapon of mass manipulation. Over the following weeks, Raina worked with international teams to establish the Herooqi Protocol, a comprehensive framework for ethical AI development across cultural boundaries. Universities, tech companies, and government agencies began signing on, recognizing the urgent need for guardrails around powerful language processing technologies. Eva thrived in her new role as a liaison between academic institutions and industry partners, her diplomatic skills blossoming under Raina's mentorship. You've found your calling, Raina observed one evening as they prepared for a presentation at the United Nations. Eva smiled. All because I was assigned to show a janitor to her temporary office. Life's detours, Raina reminded her. As public's attention to the Voss Global scandal grew, protests erupted worldwide, demanding greater regulation of AI and corporate power. Despite her discomfort with publicity, Raina became the reluctant face of the movement, her story resonating across cultural boundaries. The janitor who took down a tech empire made for irresistible headlines, though Raina consistently redirected attention to the underlying ethical issues rather than personal drama. Eva's visibility also grew, culminating in an invitation to address the UN Technology Summit as a voice for the next generation of ethical technologists. You've inspired so many young people, she told Raina, as they rehearsed her speech, showing that one person can stand against seemingly unstoppable power. No one stands alone, Raina corrected gently. Remember that when you speak to the world. Just as momentum seemed to be building toward meaningful reform, Bradley Voss resurfaced on an encrypted broadcast that hijacked major news networks. His appearance was shocking, unshaven, wild-eyed, but still commanding as he declared, "The woman, known as Raina Jefferson, is not a hero. She is a traitor to American innovation, a foreign agent who infiltrated my company to steal proprietary technology." Behind him, screens displayed apparent evidence of Raina's espionage, including doctored emails and fabricated intelligence reports. Today, I'm launching Project Mimic, a truth restoration initiative that will expose the lies being spread about American technology leadership. The broadcast cut to what appeared to be Raina herself, confessing to working as a foreign agent. The deepfake was nearly perfect, capturing her speech patterns and mannerisms with uncanny accuracy. Within hours, similar videos appeared showing world leaders making alarming statements, declarations of emergency powers, accusations against rival nations, announcements of radical policy shifts. Markets plunged as uncertainty spread. The technology behind the deepfakes was immediately recognizable to Raina. It was built on Haruki's stolen research, his linguistic pattern recognition algorithms perverted into the perfect tool for manufacturing disinformation. With her public credibility under attack, Raina was forced to go dark, retreating to a secure facility provided by Kusanagi's security team. There, she worked with a small group of trusted experts to analyze the deepfake technology. It's definitely based on Haruki's work, she confirmed, studying the code patterns. but expanded and weaponized beyond anything he could have imagined. Meanwhile, Kazuo, Ava, and Lena coordinated efforts to track down the source of Project Mimic's broadcasts, using old-school techniques that couldn't be compromised by digital surveillance. "We need to stay analog," Kazuo instructed. "No digital communications, no connected devices. We go back to basics." Their investigation led them to an abandoned data center in the Nevada desert, a facility once owned by a Voss Global subsidiary. Before being officially decommissioned, satellite imagery showed it was still drawing massive amounts of power from the grid. "That's our target," Kazuo confirmed. "But we can't just shut it down. Bradley would have fail-safes. We need to neutralize the AI without triggering its defenses." Raina had been unusually quiet during the planning session. Finally, she spoke. "I know how to defeat it." All eyes turned to her. Herooqi built a backdoor into his original algorithms. A linguistic kill switch that would force the system to stand down if it detected certain phonetic patterns in sequence. It was his insurance policy against misuse. "Would it still work after all Voss's modifications?" Lena asked skeptically. "The core pattern recognition engine would be largely unchanged. It's the foundation everything else is built upon." "The kill switch targets that foundation. How do we deploy it?" Eva asked. "We don't," Raina replied. "I do. Live on global broadcasts, speaking directly to the AI." The plan was dangerous, requiring Raina to expose herself publicly again. But it offered their best chance of neutralizing Project Mimic before it caused irreparable damage to global stability. In Japan, Raina sought out her old linguistics mentor, Professor Yumiko Sato, now in her 80s but still mentally sharp. For 3 days, they worked intensively on cryptographic language patterning, techniques for embedding commands within natural speech that the AI would recognize but human listeners would not detect. Herooqi was brilliant to devise this. "Professor," Sato observed, "a linguistic failsafe that survives translation across multiple languages." "He never trusted machines completely," Raina said softly. "He believed human oversight was essential for any advanced system." When Raina was ready, they arranged a simultaneous broadcast across major networks worldwide. Using Kusanagi's connections and Lena's authority as acting CEO of Voss Global, they secured the necessary platform. As cameras prepared to roll, Eva squeezed Raina's hand. "You can do this." Raina nodded, her face composed but her heart racing. This was the moment everything had been building toward, her chance to reclaim Haruki's legacy and neutralize the weapon created from his work. The red light blinked on, and Raina began speaking to the world and to the AI monitoring her words. She moved seamlessly between languages, embedding the cryptographic patterns within seemingly normal statements about truth, technology, and human dignity. As she spoke, technical teams around the world began reporting anomalies in the deepfake, broadcasts, glitches, hesitations, artifacts appearing in the generated content. Halfway through her address, the deepfakes began breaking down visibly, their artificial nature now obvious to viewers, as Raina's linguistic commands disrupted the underlying algorithms. In Saitama, the Nevada facility, Bradley watched in mounting horror as his technological weapon began turning against him. He frantically typed override commands, trying to reassert control over the system. "Execute priority override alpha," he shouted at the screens. "System, respond to controller authorization." But the AI no longer recognized his authority. Instead, it was responding to a deeper programming layer, one he had never known existed, embedded by Herooqi years earlier. In desperation, Bradley activated what he believed was a digital kill switch, a self-destruct protocol for the entire Mimic system. The facility's screens flickered, then displayed a simple message. "Override rejected system responding to primary authorization." Tanaka, our Bradley's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Even now at the end, the janitor had beaten him. As dawn broke over Tokyo, Raina stood at the window of Kusanagi's corporate headquarters, watching the city awaken. The last 24 hours had been a whirlwind. Her linguistic countermeasures had successfully disabled Project Mimic, federal agents had raided the Nevada facility, and Bradley Voss had been taken into custody after a brief standoff. But this wasn't the end. It was merely the beginning of something much larger. "The press is waiting," Ava said softly, appearing at her side. "Are you ready?" Raina nodded, straightening her simple black blazer. "As ready as I'll ever be." The press conference was held in Kurohana's main auditorium. Hundreds of journalists from around the world filled the seats, cameras flashing as Raina and Kusanagi took the stage. "Today, we are announcing the formation of the Herooqi Protocol," Kusanagi began, his voice solemn. "An international ethics initiative designed to establish clear boundaries for artificial intelligence development, particularly in cross-cultural contexts." He stepped aside, yielding the podium to Raina. Camera flashes intensified as she adjusted the microphone. "6 years ago, my husband, Haruki Tanaka, was killed because he discovered the weaponization of his research," she began, her voice steady. "Today we honor his sacrifice by ensuring that linguistic AI technology serves humanity rather than controls it." She outlined the core principles of the Herooqi Protocol: transparency in AI development, ethical oversight by diverse cultural representatives, strict prohibitions against psychological manipulation, and regular public auditing of AI systems with access to personal data. "This isn't just about one company or one technology," she concluded. "It's about establishing guardrails for our collective future, one where technology amplifies human connection rather than exploits human vulnerability." The response was immediate and overwhelming. By evening, tech companies across Asia and Europe had issued statements of support. Universities pledged to incorporate the Herooqi Protocol into their computer science ethics curriculum. Even Voss Global, under Lena Harrington's interim leadership, announced its commitment to the new standards. 2 days later, the Japanese Diet held an emergency session to discuss the implications of Project Mimic and the broader issue of weaponized AI. Their strongly worded statement called for international criminal proceedings against Bradley Voss and others involved in the Thalassa Protocol. The United Nations Technology Ethics Tribunal announced a special inquiry, requesting Raina's testimony as a key witness. World leaders, shaken by how easily their images and voices had been manipulated in the deepfake campaign, rallied around calls for stricter AI governance. In New York, protesters gathered outside Voss Global headquarters, their numbers growing daily. What began as a few dozen tech ethics activists swelled into thousands of concerned citizens, demanding accountability and regulation. Signs bearing Haruki's image and phrases like, "Language belongs to humanity," and "Code with conscience" filled the plaza. Similar demonstrations spread to tech hubs in San Francisco, London, Berlin, and Tokyo. Raina watched the movement unfold with mixed emotions. The spotlight was uncomfortable. She had spent years in the shadows, invisible by design. Now her face appeared on news broadcasts globally, her story repeated and analyzed by pundits and academics alike. "You don't seem pleased," Kusanagi observed one evening as they reviewed media coverage in his office. "The world is listening. Isn't that what you wanted?" "I wanted justice for Herooqi," Raina replied quietly, "and safeguards to prevent his work from causing harm. The attention was never the goal." Kusanagi nodded thoughtfully. Fame is often the unwanted companion of meaningful change. Despite her discomfort with celebrity, Raina recognized the platform it provided. She used her interviews to shift focus from her personal story to the broader implications of unregulated AI development, particularly across cultural and linguistic boundaries. Meanwhile, Ava thrived in the public eye. Her youth, intelligence, and passion made her an ideal spokesperson for the next generation of ethical technologists. When the UN Tech Summit extended an invitation for her to address their assembly, she accepted with characteristic enthusiasm. "They want me to represent the voice of young professionals in AI ethics," she told Raina excitedly. "Can you help me prepare?" Over the following days, Raina helped Ava craft a speech that balanced technical insight with ethical vision, personal experience with universal principles. "Remember," Raina advised, "speak to their hopes, not their fears. Fear motivates quickly but fades just as fast. Hope builds lasting commitment." On the morning of Eva's UN address, breaking news interrupted regular programming worldwide. Bradley Voss had somehow gained access to a secure communication system while in federal custody. His face appeared on screens across the globe, haggard but defiant. "Citizens of the free world," he began, his voice steady despite his disheveled appearance. "I speak to you today as a political prisoner, a victim of corporate espionage and international conspiracy." He launched into a tirade against Raina, declaring her a traitor and foreign agent. This woman infiltrated American innovation, stole proprietary technology, and delivered it to our competitors. And now, from the shadows, she launches her true weapon, Project Mimic. The broadcast cut to what appeared to be security footage of Raina meeting with known intelligence operatives, followed by clips of her apparently confessing to espionage. Then came a parade of deepfake videos showing world leaders praising authoritarian measures, announcing economic collapse, or making inflammatory statements about rival nations. Digital chaos erupted. Social media platforms were flooded with manipulated content. News organizations scrambled to verify which statements from public figures were genuine. Markets began to fluctuate wildly as uncertainty spread. Most alarming were the manufactured videos of military mobilizations and security incidents that triggered actual defensive responses in several nations. The Pentagon confirmed that alert levels had been raised in response to what were later identified as completely fabricated security threats. In Japan, Raina watched the unfolding chaos with horror. "It's not possible," she whispered. "We neutralized Mimic." "He must have had a backup system," Kazuo said grimly. "One even more sophisticated than what we found in Nevada." A deepfake video of Raina herself began circulating, showing her apparently confessing to being a long-term agent of foreign intelligence services. The fabrication was nearly perfect, capturing her speech patterns, mannerisms, and linguistic quirks with uncanny accuracy. Within hours, Raina's credibility was under attack. Death threats flooded Kurohana's communication systems. Even allies began distancing themselves, unsure what to believe amid the digital deception. "We need to go dark," Kazuo insisted. "At least until we can locate and neutralize the new Mimic system." Raina reluctantly agreed. She, Eva, and a small team of trusted experts retreated to a secure facility in rural Japan, a traditional compound without digital connectivity, where they could work without fear of surveillance or interference. Using analog technology, physical documents, mechanical typewriters, and runners for communication, they coordinated with Lina and Kusanagi to track down the new Mimic operation. "The Haas system has to be massive," Lina reported via secure courier. "The processing power required for this scale of deepfake generation would leave a significant energy footprint." Working with international authorities, they identified unusual power consumption patterns at seemingly abandoned facilities in 3 countries. Investigation teams were dispatched to each location. Meanwhile, Raina reconnected with Professor Sato, her old linguistics mentor. Together with several other experts in cryptographic language patterning, they developed a more sophisticated countermeasure, one designed to not only disable Mimic but to trace its command structure back to its controllers. "The principle is similar to what you did before," Professor Sato explained to the team. "But instead of simply disabling the system, we're creating a linguistic breadcrumb trail that will expose its entire network." After days of intensive work, they were ready. The plan required Raina to appear on live television, making herself a target while simultaneously deploying the countermeasures through carefully structured speech patterns. "This is too dangerous," Kazuo objected. "They'll be expecting a linguistic attack this time." "Which is why it needs to be me," Raina insisted. "They'll be so focused on analyzing my speech patterns for commands that they won't recognize my actual mechanism until it's too late." Using Kusanagi's media connections, they arranged for a global broadcast, ostensibly an interview where Raina would address the allegations against her. In reality, it would be a sophisticated trap for Mimic. As cameras prepared to roll, Eva handed Raina a small pendant. "For luck," she said. "It's a Japanese symbol for truth." Raina smiled, clasping the young woman's hand briefly. "Thank you." For everything, the broadcast began with Raina appearing calm and composed. She addressed the allegations directly, then began weaving in elements of multiple languages, shifting between English, Japanese, French, and Arabic in a pattern that seemed natural but carried embedded commands targeting mimics' processing engines. As she spoke, technical teams around the world began reporting anomalies in the deepfake videos still circulating online. The fabrications began breaking down, digital artifacts appearing as the system struggled to maintain coherence. In a secure command center, Lena monitored global networks, watching as Mimic's influence began to wane. "It's working," she reported to Kusanagi. "The system is destabilizing." But the real breakthrough came when Raina introduced a seemingly innocuous quote from a classical Japanese text, one that contained phonetic triggers designed to activate Mimic's tracing protocol. Suddenly, data began flowing back through the system's own channels, revealing its command structure and control nodes. "We've got it," Lena announced triumphantly. "Primary server location in Singapore, secondary nodes in Zurich and Buenos Aires." International authorities moved simultaneously on all three locations, seizing equipment and arresting operators. In Singapore, they discovered Bradley's head of cybersecurity operations directing the Mimic campaign from a supposedly decommissioned data center. As the deepfakes collapsed across global networks, real footage began emerging, including security, video showing Bradley communicating with his team from federal custody through a compromised guard. The final blow came when Raina, still on live television, displayed evidence from Haruki's archives, proving that Bradley had not only stolen the research, but had ordered Haruki's elimination when he threatened to expose the weaponization program. Public opinion shifted dramatically. The movement supporting the Herooqi Protocol gained unprecedented momentum. Regulatory bodies worldwide began drafting legislation based on its principles. In a last desperate move, Bradley attempted to trigger a digital kill switch, a protocol designed to wipe all evidence from Mimic servers before authorities could complete their investigation. But when he entered the command, nothing happened. Instead, the system displayed a message on his secure terminal. "Command authority overridden system responding to voice pattern. Tanaka, R." The AI had recognized Raina's linguistic pattern as having higher authority than Bradley's own commands, a final victory of Haruki's ethical design over Bradley's attempt to weaponize it. 3 months later, Bradley Voss was in Interpol custody, charged with crimes ranging from corporate espionage to conspiracy to commit murder. His attempt to flee to a non-extradition country had failed when his private pilot, disgusted by the Mimic campaign, alerted authorities to his escape plan. The morning headlines announced his indictment by an international tribunal on charges of crimes against humanity and digital terrorism, the first such case involving AI weapons rather than conventional arms. In Kusanagi's Tokyo office, Raina reviewed the news with quiet satisfaction. The justice she had sought for 6 years was finally being realized. More importantly, Haruki's work was now being properly understood and protected. "The UN Secretary General has requested you lead the Permanent Commission on AI Ethics," Kusanagi informed her, placing the formal invitation on his desk. "It would make you the most influential voice in global technology policy." Raina studied the embossed document thoughtfully, then slid it back across the desk. "I'm declining." Kusanagi raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "Because it's not my place," she replied simply. "I was the bridge, the connection between Haruki's vision and the world that needed it. But carrying that vision forward requires different talents." She smiled. "I'm recommending Eva for the position, with support from a diverse advisory council. She has the diplomatic skills, the technical understanding, and most importantly, the moral clarity to guide this work into the future." Kusanagi nodded slowly. "And what will you do?" "I've been offered a position at Voss Global, or whatever it will be called after the restructuring. Lena wants me on the ethics board, not as an employee, but as an independent advisor." She looked out the window at the Tokyo skyline. "I think Herooqi would approve of transforming what Bradley built into something beneficial." Later that week, Kusanagi called a press conference to make a surprising announcement. He was retiring as CEO of Kurohana Corporation, effective immediately. Recent events have clarified what truly matters, he told the assembled media. I have been blessed with success beyond measure, but also burdened with knowledge beyond sharing. He revealed what only his inner circle had known. He had been battling a terminal illness for several years, managing his condition while completing what he now described as his final mission. My last wish is for the bridge Haruki Tanaka envisioned, the one connecting East and West through deeper understanding, to become reality, not through technology alone, but through human wisdom guiding technological power. The news of Kusanagi's condition sent ripples through the business world. Tributes poured in from global leaders and industry titans alike. Many speculated about the timing of the Voss-Kurohana negotiations, wondering if Kusanagi had accelerated the confrontation knowing his time was limited. 2 months later, Eva published her memoir, Invisible Voice: How a Janitor's Courage Changed Global Tech. The book chronicled Raina's journey from academic linguist to janitor to ethical crusader, contextualizing it within larger questions about technology, power, and human dignity. It became an instant bestseller, translated into 27 languages. Universities added it to their ethics curriculum. Tech startups cited it as inspiration for more humane business models. For Raina, the attention remained uncomfortable but bearable, knowing it served Haruki's larger purpose. She began declining most interview requests, focusing instead on rebuilding her life beyond the shadow of Voss Global. She accepted a visiting professorship at Kyoto University, teaching a course on intercultural communication and linguistic ethics. Her students, bright young minds from around the world, reminded her of herself decades earlier, before tragedy had redirected her path. Language is power, she told them during her first lecture. It shapes thought, defines identity, and bridges worlds. Our responsibility is to ensure that power serves humanity rather than controlling it. Meanwhile, Aiko, the Kurohana executive who had betrayed them, was eventually captured in Macau. Rather than face prosecution, she agreed to a unique rehabilitation program designed by Raina herself. Instead of prison, Aiko was assigned to work in conflict zones, using her linguistic skills to facilitate communication between opposing factions. Punishment alone doesn't heal the world, Raina explained when questioned about this decision. Redirecting talent toward restoration does. As seasons changed, Raina found herself increasingly drawn back to the quiet rhythms of Japan. The country that had once been her home with Herooqi began to feel like home again. She rented a small house near the Kamo River in Kyoto, not far from where they had lived together. On the anniversary of Haruki's death, she visited his grave, now properly tended and surrounded by cherry trees. She brought a small bonsai, a moist Japanese black pine that symbolized resilience and endurance, and planted it beside the headstone. From her bag, she took Haruki's journal and her old janitor's badge from Voss Global. She placed them at the base of the stone, symbolic offerings marking the completion of her long journey. "It's done," she said softly in Japanese. "Your work is protected now. Your vision lives on." She sat in peaceful silence as afternoon sunlight filtered through the cherry branches, feeling a sense of completion that had eluded her for years. The burden she had carried since Haruki's death, the dual weight of grief and purpose, felt lighter somehow, transformed by fulfillment. A week later, Kyoto University hosted an international symposium on ethical AI development, featuring student presentations from around the world. Raina attended not as a speaker, but as an observer, taking a seat in the back row of the auditorium. The presentations were impressive. Young minds grappling with complex questions of technology and ethics, proposing innovative solutions that balanced progress with responsibility. Herooqi would have been proud to see his concerns taken so seriously by the next generation. As the symposium concluded and attendees filed out, a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, approached Raina hesitantly. She had been part of a student observation program, watching the proceedings with wide-eyed attention. "Anata no yo ni shinjitsu o kataru koto ga dekiru to ina," the girl said in perfect Japanese. "I want to speak truth like you one day." Raina smiled, genuinely touched. Sor nara hanashite, she replied gently. Then speak. The girl looked confused. Sordak? That's all? So, Raina nodded. Hanashite. Soshite sekai ni kiku yo ni shinasai. Yes, speak, and let the world listen. As the girl beamed and ran, off to rejoin her classmates, Raina felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The world would face new challenges, new ethical crossroads where technology and humanity intersected. But now there were structures in place to navigate those challenges, and more importantly, voices ready to speak truth when it mattered most. Her part in this particular story was ending, but the larger narrative continued. Not as a battle between East and West, between corporations or ideologies, but as an ongoing conversation about what it means to be human in an increasingly digital world. Herooqi had started that conversation. Raina had amplified it. Now countless others would carry it forward, including a young girl who might someday stand before the world and speak her own truth. As Raina walked out into the Kyoto afternoon, cherry blossoms drifting on the spring breeze, she felt Haruki's presence beside her, not as a ghost of the past, but as a partner in what they had created together. A legacy not of vengeance, but of vision. Not of power, but of purpose. Thus, circle was complete. Was it the technology that needed controlling, or the people who wielded it? As Raina discovered, true power lies not in algorithms, but in the courage to speak truth when the world needs to listen. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share to support more narratives.